My name is Lucy, and I'm 34 years old. Standing in that elegant ballroom 3 weeks after burying my mother, I never imagined my husband would choose this moment to mock her death. The crystal chandeliers cast shadows across Ryan's face as he said those words that would change everything. My mother's final gift to me wasn't just the ring on my finger, it was about to reveal itself in the most unexpected way. Before I share what happened next, let me know where you're watching from. If you've ever faced betrayal from someone you trusted most, please subscribe to hear how one powerful moment changed my entire life. 8 years ago, I was working 12-hour shifts as a cardiac nurse at Presbyterian Hospital in downtown Dallas. That Tuesday morning started like any other, rushing between patient rooms, checking vitals, administering medications. Around 10:30, I literally crashed into someone while turning the corner near the pharmacy. Charts went flying everywhere, and when I looked up, there was Ryan, the new head pharmacist, already gathering my papers with the most charming smile I'd ever seen. He was everything I thought I wanted. Tall, successful, with sandy brown hair that fell perfectly across his forehead. But what caught me wasn't his looks, it was how he remembered my name after that single collision. Every morning for the next month, he'd appear at the nurse's station with a coffee prepared exactly how I liked it: 2 sugars, oat milk, extra hot. He'd learned my preferences just by watching, paying attention to details nobody else noticed. My mother Margaret saw through him immediately. I still remember that Sunday dinner when I first brought Ryan home. She served her famous pot roast, smiled politely through his stories about pharmaceutical conferences and expansion plans, but later, while washing dishes, she grabbed my hand. Her exact words were, "Lucy, that man loves the idea of you, not you. When someone shows you their true self, believe them the first time." I dismissed her concerns as typical mother protectiveness. After all, Margaret had raised me alone after Dad died when I was 12. She'd been cautious about every boyfriend, worried about anyone who might hurt her only daughter. But Ryan seemed different. He brought her flowers, complimented her cooking, asked about her garden. He played the part perfectly. We married 2 years later in a small ceremony. Ryan insisted we save money for a house instead of wasting it on one day. Only 50 guests, no band, simple decorations. Margaret wore her navy dress from my college graduation, smiled in all the photos, hugged Ryan like a son. But that night she whispered in my ear during our dance, "I hope I'm wrong about him, sweetheart. For your sake, I truly hope I'm wrong." The first 5 years felt like a dream. Ryan climbed the corporate ladder with impressive speed, moving from head pharmacist to district manager, then regional director of one of the largest pharmaceutical companies in Texas. His salary tripled. We bought a 4-bedroom colonial in Highland Park, the kind of neighborhood where lawn services came weekly and everyone drove European cars. I reduced my hours at the hospital to part-time, then eventually to per diem, only working when they desperately needed coverage. Ryan said it made sense. "Why exhaust yourself with those brutal shifts when I make enough for both of us? You can focus on making our house a home. Maybe start thinking about children." It sounded logical, romantic even. I threw myself into decorating, cooking elaborate meals, hosting dinner parties for his colleagues. I became the perfect corporate wife, the one who remembered everyone's names, their kids' activities, their dietary restrictions. Through it all, my relationship with Margaret remained my anchor. We talked every single day at 4 o'clock. She'd call during her afternoon tea, and I'd tell her about my day, the new recipe I'd tried, the book club selection, anything and everything. Sunday dinners were sacred. Ryan often had conferences or golf games, but I never missed those dinners. Margaret and I would cook together, her teaching me the recipes her mother had passed down, stories seasoning every dish. 6 months ago, everything changed with one phone call. I was preparing Ryan's favorite salmon dinner when Margaret called, her voice shaking. "The doctor found something, Lucy, on my pancreas. They're running more tests," but he used the word aggressive. I dropped the platter salmon, sliding across the imported Italian tile, my world tilting off its axis. The diagnosis came back 2 days later. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer already spread to her liver. 3 to 6 months, maybe 8 with treatment. I sat in that sterile oncology office, holding her hand while she absorbed the news with more grace than anyone should have to muster. She looked at the doctor and simply asked, "Will I have time to see the spring roses bloom one more time?" Ryan's reaction when I told him was the first crack in my perfect marriage facade. He sighed, actually sighed, like I'd just told him about a traffic delay. Well, we knew she was getting older. At least she had a good life. These things happen. When I stared at him in shock, he quickly added, "Of course I'm sorry, honey. This must be hard for you." But his eyes were already back on his laptop scrolling through quarterly reports. The next 4 months revealed the man my mother had seen from the beginning. Every time Margaret had a chemotherapy appointment, Ryan suddenly had an urgent meeting. When she needed to be admitted for pain management, he had a conference in Phoenix that absolutely couldn't be rescheduled. I spent nights sleeping on hospital recliners while he texted complaints about having to order takeout. One afternoon, I came home early from the hospice center to find Ryan on the phone in his study. The door was cracked and his voice carried clearly. "I'm telling you, Brad, this cancer thing is killing our summer plans. We were supposed to go to Cabo next month, but Lucy's completely consumed with her mother's drama. Yeah, I know everyone dies, but Margaret's really milking this for attention." I stood frozen in the hallway, my hand pressed against my mouth to stifle any sound. He continued laughing, actually said to Lucy that maybe this is a blessing in disguise. No more Sunday dinners with the mother-in-law, right? The old bat never liked me anyway. When I confronted him that evening, he transformed instantly into the apologetic husband. Work stress was getting to him. He didn't mean those things, he was just venting to a friend who wouldn't judge. He held me while I cried, promised to be more supportive, even sent flowers to Margaret's room the next day. Lies wrapped in roses' thorns hidden beneath silk ribbons. 3 weeks before she died, Margaret gave me her mother's ring. It wasn't valuable by Ryan's standards, just a simple gold band with a small sapphire worn thin from decades of wear. Her fingers had become so swollen from the medications that she'd had to remove it. She pressed it into my palm during what we both knew was one of our last coherent conversations. "This ring survived the Depression, World War II, your father's death, and my cancer. It's seen love and loss, struggle and triumph. Promise me you'll wear it when you need strength, Lucy. And promise me you'll remember that you're stronger than you know. You don't need anyone else to complete you. You never did." Ryan saw the ring that night and immediately asked about its worth. When I explained it was sentimental, not valuable, he actually suggested we should sell it to help with medical bills. That's when I started seeing what Margaret had seen all along. Every gesture had a price tag, every emotion a calculation. The night Margaret died, Ryan was at a bar with his pharmaceutical team celebrating exceeding quarterly projections. I'd called him 3 times, texted that she was declining rapidly, but he didn't respond until after midnight, 5 hours after she'd taken her last breath. His excuse was that the bar was loud, he hadn't felt his phone vibrate. He showed up smelling like whiskey and cologne that wasn't his usual brand. The funeral became Ryan's networking opportunity. He invited 12 of his business associates, introduced himself to my mother's friends as a senior executive, handed out business cards at the reception. I heard him tell his regional manager that at least now we could travel more for company events. My mother's body was barely in the ground, and he was already calculating the benefits of her absence. 2 days after the funeral, I overheard him on another call. He was in the garage, probably thinking I was asleep. "Yeah, the old lady finally kicked it. Thank God, honestly. Lucy was spending every minute at that hospice. Cost us a fortune in gas alone, not to mention the time away from hosting dinners. You know how important those social events are for climbing the ladder?" But the worst revelation came when I found an email he'd sent to his brother. I'd been looking for a receipt on his laptop when I saw it in his sent folder. Subject line just said, "Update on Margaret." The content made my stomach turn. He'd written, "The cancer is actually moving faster than expected, which is good news for us. Lucy thinks there's an inheritance, but I already checked. The old woman has nothing but that crappy little house and some worthless jewelry. At least when she's gone, Lucy won't have any excuse to avoid the Fisher party or the corporate retreat." I printed that email, folded it carefully, and placed it in the drawer with my mother's ring. Evidence of who my husband really was, black and white, proof of his cruelty. But I was too deep in grief to act on it, too exhausted from caregiving and loss to fight another battle. The party invitation arrived 1 week after the funeral. Ryan's company was celebrating their best quarter in 5 years, a black tie gala at the Ritz-Carlton. I was still wearing black every day, still waking up at 4 o'clock expecting my mother's call, still reaching for my phone to share something with her before remembering she was gone. I told Ryan I couldn't possibly attend. The thought of making small talk while my grief was still so raw felt impossible, but he insisted, his voice taking on that edge I'd learned meant there would be consequences for refusing. "This is crucial for my promotion, Lucy. William Harrison himself will be there. He's the CEO, for God's sake. You can't embarrass me by not showing up. What would people think?" So I put on the black cocktail dress I'd worn to my mother's wake, covered my swollen eyes with makeup, and forced myself into the car. The hotel ballroom was everything Ryan loved: crystal chandeliers, gold accents, a string quartet playing softly in the corner. Executives in designer suits mingled with their perfectly styled wives, champagne-flowing laughter echoing off marble walls. William Harrison stood out immediately, not because of his presence, but because of his eyes. While everyone else wore the mask of corporate celebration, his carried a depth I recognized. He was older, maybe 60, with silver hair and the kind of wrinkles that come from both laughter and sorrow. When Ryan introduced us, Harrison took my hand, gently looking directly at me, rather than through me like most of Ryan's colleagues did. "Mrs. Mitchell, Ryan tells me you recently lost your mother." "I'm deeply sorry. I lost my wife last year to cancer. The grief, it changes you, doesn't it? There's no timeline for healing, despite what others might expect from us." His words were the first genuine comfort I'd received from anyone in Ryan's circle. I felt tears threatening and managed a soft thank you. Ryan immediately jumped in, clearly uncomfortable with the direction of conversation. He started telling Harrison about the quarterly numbers, the new distribution deal, anything to shift away from emotion. But then, probably fueled by his third whiskey and desperate to impress Ryan, made a fatal error. He decided to entertain the table with what he called a funny story about my mother's final days. "You know, Bill," he started using the familiar name Harrison never invited him to use. "Lucy's mother was quite a character at the end. The morphine made her completely loopy. There was this one time," he paused for effect, making sure other executives were listening, "when she thought the pain medication pump was the TV remote. He laughed at his own setup, nobody else did." But Ryan was too deep in his performance to notice the discomfort spreading across faces the way Harrison's expression had turned to stone. Ryan continued louder now, animated with false humor. "She pressed that button 20 times in a row, wondering why the channels weren't changing. The nurses found her completely doped up, talking to people who weren't there. Classic Margaret, always dramatic, even when dying." The silence that followed was deafening. A woman at our table covered her mouth in shock. Harrison's assistant looked at her plate, but Ryan, oblivious or uncaring, delivered his final blow. "At least Lucy's free now from all that mother-daughter codependency. They were unnaturally close, if you ask me. Margaret always acted like she was dying even when she was healthy, so the real thing was just an extended performance. Now we can finally live our lives without the constant drama and Sunday dinner obligations." I stood up so fast my chair scraped against the floor. Every eye turned to me, some with pity, others with horror at what they'd witnessed. My hands shook as I grabbed my purse, my mother's ring catching the light. I needed to leave to escape before I either screamed or collapsed. But Harrison's hand raised slightly, a gentle gesture that somehow held more authority than any words. He stood slowly, deliberately, his full height commanding the room's attention. When he looked at Ryan, the temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Harrison's voice carried the kind of quiet power that made the entire ballroom lean in to listen. He didn't need to raise his voice. 40 years of leadership had taught him that true authority whispers while insecurity shouts. "Ryan," he began, each word measured and deliberate. "In my 30 years of building this company, From a small regional distributor to a national corporation, I've learned something fundamental about character. How a man treats his family, especially in their moments of grief and vulnerability, reveals everything I need to know about his capacity for leadership. Ryan's face had gone pale, his whiskey glass frozen halfway to his lips. He tried to interject, "Mr. Harrison, it was just a joke," but Harrison's raised hand silenced him instantly. "When my Emily was diagnosed with breast cancer 3 years ago," Harrison continued, his voice carrying a tremor of controlled emotion, "she fought for 37 months. 37 months of chemotherapy that stole her beautiful hair, radiation that burned her skin, procedures that left her sobbing in pain. Do you know what I did during those 37 months, Ryan?" The question hung in the air like a blade. Ryan shook his head mutely, his earlier bravado evaporating under Harrison's gaze. "I held her head while she vomited. I learned to braid what was left of her hair. I slept on hospital floors, missed board meetings, delegated acquisitions worth millions. Because every moment with her wasn't a burden or an obligation or something to joke about later. It was a privilege, the privilege of loving someone through their darkest hours." Harrison turned to me, then his expression softening with genuine compassion. "Mrs. Mitchell Lucy, I am deeply sorry for your loss. Losing a mother is losing your first friend, your first teacher, your first example of unconditional love. And I'm even more sorry for what you've just endured here in what should have been a safe space among colleagues and friends." He picked up his water glass, taking a slow sip while the room held its collective breath. When he set it down, the crystal rang against the table like a judge's gavel. "Ryan, effective immediately, you're suspended from all duties pending a full review of your conduct and leadership capabilities. Security will escort you from the premises tonight and arrange for you to collect your personal items from your office tomorrow." Ryan jumped to his feet, his chair crashing backward. "Mr. Harrison, you can't be serious. It was just a joke. Everyone knows I'm your top performer in the Southwest region." Harrison's expression didn't change. "Yes, you've met your numbers. But numbers without humanity are just empty digits. A leader who mocks death, who finds humor in suffering, who treats his wife's grief as an inconvenience, that's not a leader at all. That's a liability." A woman across the table, someone I'd seen at multiple company events but never heard speak, suddenly stood up. "Mr. Harrison, if I may." Her voice was steady but emotional. "6 months ago, my father was dying. I requested 3 days off to be with him. Ryan denied it, saying quarter end was more important than personal issues. He told me, and I quote, 'Death happens on its own schedule, but quarterly reports have deadlines.'" Another voice joined in, a younger man from accounting. "He made me miss my mother's last surgery because of a meeting that could have been an email. When I complained to HR, he gave me the worst performance review of my career." More stories emerged, a cascade of cruelty revealing itself in the safety of Harrison's protection. Ryan had built his success on the backs of people's pain, climbing the corporate ladder by stepping on those who showed any sign of human vulnerability. Harrison listened to each account, his jaw tightening with each revelation. When the last person finished speaking, he turned back to Ryan with finality. "This isn't just about tonight, though. Tonight would be enough. This is about a pattern of behavior that has no place in any organization I lead. We build our success on excellence and compassion in equal measure. Those who can't balance both don't belong here." He signaled to security, 2 discreet men in dark suits who had been standing by the doors. "Ryan, you'll leave now. Any attempt to contact Mrs. Mitchell or any employee involved in tonight's discussion will result in immediate legal action. Your final paycheck will include severance as required by law, nothing more." Ryan looked at me, his eyes wild with rage and disbelief. "Lucy, tell them this is a misunderstanding. You're my wife, for God's sake." But I found my voice steady and clear, my mother's ring warm against my finger. "No, Ryan. I was your prop, your accessory, your convenient excuse. But I was never truly your wife. A husband doesn't celebrate his wife's mother's death. A husband doesn't turn grief into a punchline." As security flanked him, Ryan made one last desperate attempt. You'll regret this, Lucy. You're nothing without me. You gave up your career, you have no money of your own. You'll come crawling back. Harrison stepped between us, his presence a wall of protection. Actually, Ryan, I think you'll find that Lucy has more resources than you realize. Our company has an extensive legal team that helps employees and their families with personal matters. Consider them at her disposal. Additionally, we have a position opening in our charitable foundation specifically working with cancer patients and their families. Someone with Lucy's nursing background and recent personal experience would be invaluable. He turned to me with a gentle smile. That is if you're interested, Mrs. Mitchell. The position comes with full benefits, flexible hours, and most importantly, the opportunity to turn your pain into purpose. The security guards escorted Ryan out as he continued protesting, his voice fading down the marble corridor. The ballroom remained silent for a long moment before Harrison addressed the room. Let tonight be a reminder of who we are as a company. We are not just about profits and projections. We are about people. Every number on our spreadsheets represents human beings with families, struggles, joys, and sorrows. If we forget that, we lose our soul as an organization. He raised his glass, and everyone followed. To Margaret, and to Emily, and to all the loved ones we've lost. May their memories inspire us to lead with love, not just logic, to treat each other with kindness, especially in our darkest moments, and to remember that success without compassion is the ultimate failure. The toast was met with genuine applause, not the polite corporate clapping I'd grown accustomed to, but real appreciation for truth spoken in a place that rarely heard it. People approached me throughout the rest of the evening, sharing their own losses, their own struggles with Ryan's cruelty, their admiration for my composure. But I didn't feel composed. I felt like I was standing in the rubble of my life, everything I'd built with Ryan revealed as a facade. Yet somehow in that destruction, I also felt my mother's presence, her validation, her pride that I'd finally seen what she'd always known. The parking lot confrontation was brutal in its revelation of Ryan's true self. He grabbed my arm as I tried to get to my car, his fingers digging in hard enough to leave marks. His breath reeked of desperation and whiskey. This is your fault, Lucy. You made me look weak in front of Harrison. You and your pathetic grief parading around like some tragic widow when it was just your mother. Everyone's mother dies. You're not special. I pulled free, my voice stronger than I expected. You're right, Ryan. I'm not special. But I'm human, which is more than you can say. You've spent so long pretending to have emotions that you've forgotten what they actually feel like. He laughed ugly and sharp. Oh, now you're the expert on emotions. You were nothing when I met you, just another exhausted nurse with no ambition. I made you into something. That house, those clothes, this lifestyle, all me. Actually, I said, reaching into my purse for my phone, that house is half mine according to Texas law. And those clothes purchased with joint accounts. But you know what's all yours, Ryan? This recording of you admitting to emotional abuse. My lawyer will find it very interesting. His face went white when he saw I'd been recording our entire interaction. He made a grab for my phone, but I'd already backed up everything to the cloud, a precaution I'd started taking weeks ago when his behavior became increasingly erratic. The next morning, while Ryan was at the office being formally terminated and escorted out by security, I went through our house like an investigator. What I found in his home office destroyed any remaining illusions about our marriage. First, the financial documents. 3 separate bank accounts I'd never known about containing over $200,000 siphoned from our joint investments. He'd been planning his exit for months, maybe years, moving money gradually enough that I wouldn't notice. Transaction histories showed expensive dinners at restaurants I'd never been to, hotel charges, on nights he'd claimed to be at conferences, jewelry purchases that had never made their way to me. Then came the emails. A folder labeled Exit Strategy contained correspondence with a divorce attorney dating back 8 months, 2 months before my mother's diagnosis. He'd been planning to leave me but wanted to time it for maximum financial benefit. One email read, "Need to wait until after Q4 bonus and stock options vest. Also, wife's mother showing signs of decline. Possible inheritance worth waiting to see." can always claim emotional distress from dealing with her illness as grounds. The most painful discovery was a dating profile on an executive matchmaking site created 6 months ago listing him as recently separated and looking for someone without family baggage. His ideal partner was described as independent, orphaned, or estranged from family, career-focused, no desire for deep emotional connections. Jennifer, Ryan's sister, arrived that afternoon. I'd called her thinking she'd defend him, but instead she sat at my kitchen table with tears streaming down her face. "Lucy, I've wanted to tell you for years, but he's my brother. I kept hoping he'd change. But when Mom had her stroke 3 years ago, he put her in the cheapest nursing home he could find 2 states away. He hasn't visited once. Dad sold his truck to pay for better care, and Ryan told him he was enabling Mom's attention-seeking behavior." She pulled out her phone, showing me text messages from Ryan that made my stomach turn. Complaints about being asked to contribute to their parents' care, jokes about hoping they'd hurry up and die so he could stop feeling obligated, calculations about potential inheritance that he was angry to learn didn't exist. "He's always been this way," Jennifer continued. "Even as a kid, he'd hurt animals and laugh about it. Mom took him to therapist after therapist, but he learned to say what they wanted to hear. He's not capable of real emotion, Lucy. He mimics it, studies it, performs it, but he doesn't feel it." That evening, Harrison called personally. His voice was warm, paternal, almost checking on my well-being and reiterating his offer of legal support and the position at the foundation. "Lucy, I need you to know something. This isn't charity or pity. We've been looking for someone to head our new initiative for end-of-life support services. Someone who understands both the medical and emotional aspects of terminal illness. Your nursing background combined with your recent experience makes you uniquely qualified. The fact that you maintained such grace under tonight's circumstances only confirms what I suspected. You're exactly who we need." I accepted the position that night, sitting in my mother's favorite chair, wearing her ring, feeling her strength flowing through me. The salary wasn't what Ryan made, but it was more than enough to start over. More importantly, it was work that would honor my mother's memory and help others walking the same dark path I'd just traveled. The divorce papers were filed the next week. Ryan fought dirty, claiming I'd manipulated Harrison, that I'd planned the whole scene to destroy his career. But the evidence was overwhelming: the hidden accounts, the emails, the dating profile, the testimonies from his colleagues about his cruelty. Even his own lawyer seemed disgusted by the end. The legal battle revealed the full extent of Ryan's deception, but it also revealed my own strength. My attorney, provided by Harrison's company, was a brilliant woman named Diana Chen, who specialized in financial abuse cases. She uncovered every hidden asset, every redirected investment, every lie Ryan had told about our finances. During the deposition, Ryan tried to claim I'd been unstable since my mother's death, unfit to manage money or property. Diana calmly presented my nursing credentials, my new position at the foundation, and character references from 20 colleagues who'd witnessed my professionalism during the marriage. Then she played the recording from the parking lot, Ryan's voice filling the room with his own condemnation. The judge's ruling was swift and decisive. Ryan would pay 70% of all assets due to financial manipulation and emotional abuse. The house would be sold, proceeds divided according to the settlement. He was also ordered to pay spousal support for 2 years, though I planned to never cash those checks. I didn't want his money. I wanted my freedom. The day Ryan moved out, I found a box hidden in the back of his closet. Inside were cards I'd written him over the years. Love notes, anniversary messages. Each one had been graded in red pen like a school assignment. Too emotional, B-. Lacks originality, C+. Excessive sentimentality, D. He'd been scoring my expressions of love like performance reviews. At the bottom of the box was our wedding album. He'd drawn circles around his face in every photo, rating his smile, his posture, his appearance. My face had been ignored entirely, except for one photo where he'd written, "Lucy looks appropriately adoring here. Good for professional display." I burned it all in the backyard fire pit that night, watching 8 years of manipulation turn to ash. As the smoke rose into the Texas sky, I felt something lift from my shoulders, a weight I hadn't realized I'd been carrying. My work at the foundation became my salvation. The first day I met Sarah, a 30-year-old mother whose husband was dying of brain cancer. She sat in my office exhausted and overwhelmed trying to navigate insurance forms while grieving a man who was still alive but no longer himself. "I've been where you are," I told her, not with a spouse but with someone I loved more than life itself. "The paperwork feels impossible when your heart is breaking. Let me help." Together we organized her benefits, found respite care, connected her with support groups. When she hugged me sobbing with relief, I felt my mother's presence so strongly I could almost smell her lavender perfume. Within 6 months, our program expanded to serve 200 families. We provided everything from medical advocacy to grief counseling, from financial planning to simple companionship during chemotherapy treatments. Every family I helped heal helped me heal too. Harrison became an unexpected mentor, meeting me for coffee monthly to discuss the foundation's growth and my own journey. He shared stories of his wife, Emily, how her death had transformed his understanding of what mattered in life. One afternoon, he told me something that changed my perspective entirely. "You know, Lucy, when Ryan made those jokes about your mother, I saw myself 20 years ago. I used to be like him, focused on success at any cost, treating emotions as weaknesses to be conquered. But Emily's illness taught me that our capacity to love, to grieve, to feel deeply, that's not weakness. It's the only strength that matters." A year after the party, I stood at my mother's grave on the anniversary of her death. The Texas sun was setting, painting the cemetery in shades of gold and pink. I'd brought her favorite flowers, white roses with baby's breath, and a photo from our program's first fundraising gala. "Mom," I whispered to the headstone, "you were right about everything. About Ryan, about my strength, about love being the only thing that survives." The foundation raised $3 million this year. We've helped 500 families. Your death wasn't just an ending, it was a beginning. As I turned to leave, I nearly collided with someone on the path. When I looked up, it was Ryan. He'd aged 5 years in the 12 months since I'd last seen him. His expensive suit was gone, replaced by khakis and a polo shirt with the electronics store logo. The confidence that had once radiated from him had been replaced by something hollow. "Lucy," he started, his voice lacking its old authority. I wanted to apologize. "I know it doesn't mean anything now, but losing everything made me realize what I had thrown away." I studied him for a moment, searching for sincerity but finding only self-pity. "You didn't lose everything, Ryan. You threw it away. There's a difference. And you're right. Your apology doesn't mean anything. Not because it's too late, but because you're still not sorry for hurting me or mocking my mother. You're sorry for the consequences." He tried to argue, to explain how he'd changed, but I walked away. There was nothing left to say. He'd become exactly what he'd always feared: ordinary, forgotten, alone. Meanwhile, I'd become what my mother always knew I could be: strong, purposeful, complete. The foundation's second-year gala was held in the same ballroom where my life had changed. Harrison insisted on the location, calling it Poetic Justice. This time, the room was filled with cancer survivors, families we'd helped, medical professionals who volunteered their time. The walls displayed photos of loved ones lost and saved, including a beautiful portrait of my mother that Harrison had personally commissioned. During my keynote speech, I looked out at the audience and saw faces that reflected my own journey. Widows who'd found purpose in their pain, children who'd learned too young that love means showing up when it's hardest, caregivers who'd discovered strength they never knew existed. Tonight I began my mother's ring, catching the light as I gestured. We gather, not in spite of our losses, but because of them. Each empty chair at our dinner tables has taught us that time is precious, that love is urgent, that compassion cannot wait for a convenient moment. I told them about the night a year ago when my husband mocked my mother's death in this very room, how his cruelty had seemed like the end of everything I knew. But sometimes, I continued, angels come in unexpected forms. Sometimes they wear CEO suits and carry the wisdom of their own grief. Sometimes losing everything we thought we needed shows us everything we actually have. Harrison stood to applaud, first followed by the entire room. Later, as we watched families connecting, sharing stories, finding hope in each other's survival, he said quietly, "Your mother would be so proud. Not just of what you've built, but of who you've become." The spring roses bloomed exactly as my mother had hoped to see them one last time. I planted a garden at the Foundation Center, dedicating it to her memory. Each bush represented a family we'd helped, and by the second spring, we had over 1,000 roses blooming. I never cashed Ryan's support checks, instead endorsing them directly to the foundation. When his lawyer contacted me saying Ryan wanted them back because I wasn't using them personally, Diana responded that charitable donation was indeed personal use and the law was satisfied. The irony that Ryan was involuntarily funding cancer support services wasn't lost on anyone. 6 months ago, a young nurse named Kelly joined our team. She reminded me of myself 8 years ago, eager but exhausted, passionate, but worn down by the medical system's limitations. During her interview, she mentioned her fiancé was pushing her to leave nursing for something more lucrative. I showed her my mother's ring, told her my story, watched recognition dawn in her eyes. 2 weeks later, she called to accept the position and mentioned she'd ended her engagement. He showed me who he really was when I told him about this job, she said. He called it career suicide to work for a nonprofit. Thank you for sharing your story. It helped me see mine clearly. The foundation now operates in 3 states with plans to expand nationally. We've partnered with major hospitals to provide immediate support when families receive terminal diagnoses. Our motto, suggested by Harrison, is simple: love survives. Last month, I received an unexpected call from Jennifer. Ryan had been hospitalized with chest pains, no heart attack, but severe anxiety. He'd lost another job, his 5th, since leaving the pharmaceutical company. No one would hire him at a senior level, his reputation destroyed by what happened that night, and the subsequent investigation that revealed years of workplace cruelty. She asked if I would visit him, said he'd been asking for me. I declined, but I did send a card with the foundation's information offering the same support services we provide to any family facing medical crisis. He never called, but Jennifer did, thanking me for grace he'd never earned. Today, as I finish telling you this story, I'm sitting in my office at the foundation wearing my mother's ring as I do every day. The walls are covered with photos of families we've helped, thank you cards from children who got to say goodbye to their parents properly, letters from spouses who found strength in our support groups. Harrison retired last month but remains chairman of our board. At his farewell dinner, he pulled me aside with tears in his eyes. Lucy, that night 3 years ago when I stood up to Ryan, I wasn't just defending you. I was defending the man I wish I'd been when Emily first got sick. You and your mother's story gave me a chance at redemption. Thank you for that gift. The truth is, my mother's death did set me free, just not in the cruel way Ryan meant. It freed me from a toxic marriage, from the illusion that I needed someone else to be complete, from the fear that standing up for myself would leave me with nothing. Instead, it gave me everything: purpose, community, the knowledge that love doesn't die with death. That night at the party, I lost a husband but found my calling. Harrison's words didn't just end my marriage. They began my real life. Sometimes angels come in unexpected forms, wearing CEO suits and carrying the wisdom of their own grief. Sometimes the worst moments of our lives become the foundation for our greatest purpose. My mother was right about the ring. It does give me strength, but not from the metal or the stone. The strength comes from knowing that love like hers, fierce and unconditional and eternal, exists in the world. It lives on in every family we help, every moment of grace we facilitate between the dying and those they leave behind. Some might say Ryan got what he deserved, but I don't think about it in terms of justice or revenge. I think about it as truth revealing itself. He showed the world who he really was that night, speaking cruel words that couldn't be taken back. And in response, the world showed him that cruelty has consequences, that compassion isn't weakness, that mocking death while standing in life's blessing is the ultimate poverty. I kept one thing from our marriage, a photo from our wedding day. Not because I treasure the memory, but as a reminder of how wrong we can be about people, how love can blind us to truth, how sometimes we need to lose what we think we want to find what we actually need. In the photo, my mother stands beside me, her hand on my shoulder, her expression carefully neutral. Now I can see what she saw: a daughter in danger, a marriage built on performance, a future that would require breaking before rebuilding. If you're watching this because someone you love has betrayed your grief, mocked your pain, or minimized your loss, know this: their cruelty is not a reflection of your worth or your loved one's value. It's a revelation of their emptiness, their inability to comprehend the profound privilege of loving someone through their final journey. If you're caring for someone who's dying while others in your life complain about the inconvenience, remember that you're doing sacred work. Every moment you spend holding their hand, every medication you administer, every tear you cry is a prayer in action. Don't let anyone make you feel guilty for choosing love over convenience, presence over productivity, compassion over commerce. And if you're grieving while trying to maintain a relationship with someone who doesn't understand, pay attention to how they respond to your pain. Do they hold space for your sadness, or do they rush you through it? Do they honor your loved one's memory, or do they treat it as competition for your attention? These reactions tell you everything you need to know about their capacity for real love. My mother used to say that grief is love with nowhere to go, but she was wrong about that. Grief has plenty of places to go: into service, into compassion for others, walking the same path, into building something that honors what we've lost. The foundation isn't just my job. It's my grief transformed into purpose, my love for my mother given new direction. 3 years ago, I thought my story was ending in that ballroom with public humiliation and the collapse of everything I'd built. But stories don't end with destruction. They transform. The phoenix doesn't just rise from the ashes. It's created by them. Every loss, every betrayal, every moment of pain becomes fuel for the fire of becoming. Ryan took 8 years of my life, but he couldn't touch the 28 years my mother gave me. He mocked her death, but he couldn't diminish her life. He tried to reduce our bond to codependency, but he couldn't understand that some connections transcend explanation, that mother-daughter love is the first and fiercest love we know. Today, when people ask if I regret marrying Ryan, I tell them no. Without that marriage, I wouldn't have been in that ballroom. Without his cruelty, Harrison wouldn't have stood up and changed the course of my life. Without losing everything I thought I needed, I wouldn't have found what I actually wanted. Sometimes we need to walk through darkness to recognize light, experience cruelty to understand kindness, lose ourselves to find who we really are. My name is Lucy. I'm 37 now, and I'm no longer anyone's wife. I'm a daughter still grieving, a woman still growing, a survivor still healing. I wear my mother's ring every day, run a foundation that's helped thousands of families, and sleep peacefully, knowing that I chose love over convenience, truth over comfort, purpose over privilege. That night at the party, when my husband joked about my mother's death, he thought he was entertaining the room. Instead, he revealed himself, freed me, and set in motion a chain of events that would transform pain into purpose. His boss's words didn't just silence a room. They started a revolution in my life. What's your story of transformation through betrayal? Have you found angels in unexpected places, wearing unlikely faces? Have you discovered that sometimes the worst things that happen to us become the best things that happen for us? Share your journey in the comments below, because every story of survival gives someone else permission to survive. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more stories of triumph through trial. Share this with anyone who needs to know that betrayal isn't the end, but often the beginning of something better. Together, we can build a community where grief is honored, love is celebrated, and no one has to walk through loss alone. Thank you for letting me share my mother's legacy with you. May you find your own angels in unexpected places, and may your losses transform into purpose that lights the way for others. Until next time, remember that love survives everything, even death, even betrayal, even the complete destruction of the life we planned. Love survives, and so will you.